So today we have the honors of hearing from the very prolific, award-winning Doctor of Veterinary Medicine, Dr. Katherine Polak, head of Four Paws International Stray Animal Care Unit in Southeast Asia. Dr. Polak is dedicated to animal welfare both in the U.S. and around the world. A specialist in shelter medicine and Iowa State grad, Dr. Polak works for Four Paws, an international charity active in 15 countries. She manages a variety of stray animal care programs throughout Southeast Asia, most notably against the cruel dog and cat meat trade. Prior, Dr. Polak was the medical director at Soi Dog Foundation in Thailand, where she trained local vets and launched a program in Bangkok to neuter upwards of 80,000 dogs per year. And I actually had an interview with John Dowley of Soi Dog, and he was telling me about the immensity of stray animals in Thailand, so I understand that. Stateside, she is the founding medical director of the Spayathon for Puerto Rico with Humane Society of the United States. This groundbreaking initiative will neuter 85,000 dogs and cats over the next 3 years. She also teaches in the Maddie's online shelter medicine program at the University of Florida. Also, Dr. Polak is a nominee in this year's Veterinarian Hero Award by American Humane. And by the way, I'm not sure when that's going to be announced. It's sometime in the fall on Hallmark Channel, I believe.
That's correct. Yeah, sometime in October.
Okay.
Nobody knows.
Nobody knows. It's going to be a big surprise. I have a feeling you're going to win, by the way, but that's just my hunch.
Thank you for your vote. Yeah.
So where are my manners? Welcome to the show, Dr. Polak. I am so grateful that you accepted my invitation. I'm very excited because you're the first veterinarian on the show. So.
Well, I'm honored, so thank you for having me.
Well, thank you so much for taking your time to speak with us. And obviously today we're going to talk about the wonderful work you're doing with Four Paws and also the partnerships you have formed with other animal welfare groups in Southeast Asia working to end the dog-cat meat trade. But before we delve into those details, I always like to have a little bit of a background note on our guests. So if you wouldn't mind letting us know, like, for example, where were you born and raised? And were you part of a large family? Did you always love animals? That sort of thing.
Yeah, okay, well, some of that. So I was born and raised in the Chicagoland area. So, I always, had pets in the home, and I was actually an only child, so not a big family. And so maybe that's also why I, felt a very, special connection to our, Cocker Spaniel, Coco, and rest in peace. But yeah, so a special connection with the animals that we had. I didn't necessarily know that I wanted to be a veterinarian, but I knew that I loved animals. Yep. And I went to college in New Orleans, and at that time, and I'd lived there prior, and at that time, that was when, Katrina hit. And I became very involved in the sheltering scene throughout Louisiana and really saw, firsthand the struggles and the challenges with shelter euthanasia and, abandoned and unwanted pets, and thought, well, this isn't the way it should be. Like, this is terrible. And so at that time, I decided to go the veterinarian's route, but certainly with an intention of helping, underserved animals and sheltered animals. So I went to veterinary school at Iowa State, and then I devoted the next 4 years to specialty level training. So I did an internship at Colorado State and then a residency for 3 years in shelter medicine specifically. Wow. And that was at a time where shelter medicine wasn't as much of a thing as it is now. There weren't necessarily the same benefits and whatnot. So it was really kind of groundbreaking at that time. So it was an exciting time to really kind of, pioneer, or work with, the pioneers in that field. And it was during my residency at the University of Florida when actually I went to Thailand for the first time. Mm-hmm. And that was because there was catastrophic flooding in Bangkok and with another international NGO that wanted someone to set up a...
I'm sorry to interrupt you. Was that around the tsunami that happened?
This is actually This is actually a little bit after that, and this is in Bangkok. So yeah, so that happened, and then there was this flooding in Bangkok, and so I went there to do some disaster shelter work and some spay neuter work, and yeah, and then I was really taken aback by the lack of resources, veterinary training, for animal management. Wow, you know, I just hadn't really been exposed a whole lot to that, and so then the position at Soi Dog opened up, and so it felt very natural for me to say, I said, you know, okay, I'm going to give it a year, I'm going to do, you know, the best that I can, and then, you know, forget it. What do you do in a year, right? It takes years to form those relationships and to work with government stakeholders, learn the language, all of these things, and so that's kind of my story. So I was with Soi Dog, and the position with Four Paws was very fortuitous because Four Paws, it's a global organization, but their stray animal care work has always been focused on Eastern Europe, so in Romania, Ukraine, and Bulgaria. And they were interested, in getting involved in Asia. And I said, well, here's the proposal. Like, here's what I'd like to do. I'd love to set up this partnership program and work with local charities and do dog and cat meat trade work, all that. I mean, it was very fortuitous that they were.
I mean, that's a great summary of how you got into it, because I want to ask you specifically, what year was that when you went to Thailand the first time, and was that the same year where you met the founder of Soi Dog and you got involved? Was it the same year?
No, that was actually few years prior. I'm trying to think when that was exactly now, and now I'm kind of struggling to remember the exact.
Like your first trip to Thailand. Like, I'm wondering, were you already aware there was a dog-cat meat trade issue in Southeast Asia?
No, I wasn't. And so that's what's really interesting about it, too. I mean, this had to have been now 10 years ago. I'm just guessing. So this had to have been, I don't know, 2009, somewhere around that time. And no idea. I mean, again, I had been very, you know, well trained and versed in spay neuter techniques, and, you know, as a veterinarian, as, you know, treating stray dogs and sheltering and infectious disease control. Like, no idea. I mean, I think like most people, like maybe you've heard of it, but it feels very distant. Yeah. You know, so it's really interesting where there's been this transition, you know, for me as a double boarded veterinary specialist, and now I'm like dog meat lady.
You're known for that. I mean, people recognize you for that, and to be fair, you've invested a lot of your time and years into this trade, like into ending this trade, not in the trade, trying to end the trade. And so, how many years were you medical director at Soi Dog? Like, was that? Yeah,
so I was the medical director at the shelter, specifically in Phuket, for 2 to 3 years, and then for an additional couple years, I focused internationally on mostly our dog meat trade work. So I was in and out of Korea. I was working with. I know you've had a lot of these people on your show as well, with Jeff Berry in China.
I've seen you and some of those videos. Were you working for Soi Dog at the time, and he helped them out? I think it was.
That's exactly it. We had a partnership, and so we, you know, when there was this, you know, large truck that was stopped with dogs, you know, then I would go and help and facilitate medical protocols and the treatment of these animals, which is, really challenging. So that's really, and also, I mean, at Soi Dog at that time, we had thousands of dogs that were rescued from the dog meat trade at these government shelters in northern Thailand. So, you know, also I had some responsibility ensuring the health and welfare of those animals as well. So
you weren't lacking any work. You had your hands full.
Exactly.
And I can't imagine like having to set up these spay neuter clinics. I mean, when I spoke to John of Soi Dog, it was all new. I mean, these clinics were set up for free, obviously, to spay and neuter, try to control the overpopulation. And over the span of how many years were they able to really reduce the population, would you say? Because in Bangkok alone, it was like ridiculous. I think he said something like 680,000 stray dogs.
Yeah, that was Yeah, that was a survey we did. Yeah, 640,000. But who's counting? Yeah, I mean these are rough. These are rough estimates, right? But yeah,
But
I
you
mean this
got
is a
it under
long-term initiative.
control, right? Like, I mean, I think after X amount of years, I really got.
Well, yeah, I mean, in Phuket, definitely. I mean, the transition's remarkable. I mean, you don't see the suffering of stray animals, but again, it is a bit easier to do that on an island where you can somewhat control the population a bit, versus somewhere like Bangkok that has completely open borders and a lot of traffic animals in and out as well. So it's a long-term initiative. But it's one where, with sustained effort and with sustained teams and with a maintenance approach, if you can achieve, even 70, ideally 80% sterilization rates, you're going to see a dramatic humane reduction in the dog population. But spay neuter is expensive. I mean, that's the kind of crux of the issue. Spay neuter, it costs money. It costs veterinary salaries. It costs dog
It's
salaries.
not cheap.
So but it is the the proactive way to manage populations humanely. So,
and I'm just curious, before we move on to the work with Four Paws, would you say there is a similar need in countries like China? Like, I imagine that there's strays everywhere, right? Is it an overpopulation the same way that they had in Thailand, or are you seeing that in other countries? I guess.
Yeah, I mean, every country is different, every province is different, so it's kind of hard to generalize. Certainly in places more in rural China, yes, we do have stray dog populations, but, in urban Beijing and Shanghai, not so much, right? So, and there are government policies that, are not often so friendly, right, and tolerant of free roaming animals. So, it really just depends. And our programs, I mean, Vietnam is a good instance where we, fund some programs there, and we don't see the same stray animal situation because of the rampant dog and cat meat trade situation. But that doesn't mean that we say, okay, no, we're just not going to invest money. No, we do in offering, services to pet owners, free spay neuter for them, humane education in local schools. So, dog population management, it is a toolkit of many things. And yes, spay neuter is one of those things, but there's also other things to use.
Of course, and we're going to talk about that right now. So, Four Paws, their current campaign you have. My little cat is wanting my attention. My black cats. I have 2 black cats.
Good.
But I hope to have a dog eventually to add to the family. So Four Paws, the current campaign is #ProtectMillions. I'm sure viewers at home are very familiar with that campaign. So Four Paws published a full report recently on the dog-cat meat trade issue in Southeast Asia. The report can be found on the Four Paws website, and the link will be posted in the video description below. So for people at home, they can go read up. And the report focuses on Cambodia, Indonesia, and Vietnam. And I was just curious right off the bat, like, is there a reason why you're focusing on these countries as opposed to China and South Korea?
Yeah, well, I mean, for us it made sense because we are primarily working in Southeast Asia. We have as you mentioned, Four Paws, we have offices in 15 countries around the world, but one of those, our regional headquarters is in Bangkok, but we also have a bear sanctuary in Vietnam, and we're registered in Vietnam as well. So our partnership programs were set up in Indonesia, Vietnam, Cambodia, Thailand. And so once we set these programs up, it feels like a white elephant in the room, right? You can't say, oh, I'm doing a humane, stray animal care program, but yet not address this rampant theft and, brutal slaughter of millions of animals. Like, you have to address that. And so it made sense for us to, focus our, campaign and our efforts on Southeast Asia, particularly in some places where, there's maybe not as much attention.
No, that's a very good point, because I think there's a lot of organizations that are already doing a great work in China and South Korea. So it's good to embrace these other countries where there's less attention, like you said, and there's less resources. I think Four Paws is also a member of the Dog Meat Free Indonesia Coalition.
Correct. Yeah, that's very near and dear to my heart for sure. So that's another reason too, is because we are a member of DMFI, of Dogs Meat Free Indonesia, and we're also a member of ACPA, which is the Asia Canine Protection Alliance, which works in
with
Vietnam.
Animals Asia and Change for Animals Foundation, I believe.
Correct. Yep. Correct. Yep. Sure. And HSI. Yeah, the four of us are members of that. So that's more of a lobbying coalition within Vietnam.
Okay. So obviously the dog cat meat trade is a threat to animal welfare and human health. And so we want to obviously address the various problematic aspects of the trade, and specifically as it relates to Cambodia, Indonesia, and Vietnam. So as far as the report goes, I believe the bulk of the victims of this trade in those countries are still pretty much strays and stolen pets. And there's no dog farming happening in those countries as it happens in South Korea.
The farming of dogs, the practice of farming dogs is really unique to Korea. We definitely don't see that as much, or we don't see that at all in Southeast Asia. It is, the rampant theft and sometimes, the odd-off trading of pots and pans for unwanted dogs and cats. Yeah.
Yes. Well, that's it. At one point in the report, it does talk about specifically in Cambodia, because there's a lot of lack of resources. People are poor, and obviously they can trade their pet for a few dollars to buy them what they need to feed their family. Well, they're going to do it, right? So that's part of the problem. It's unfortunately the governments, I guess, should be investing in retraining programs, but we'll talk about that a little bit later. At this point, I wanted you to maybe address various stages of the trade. So namely the transportation stage. What happens to dogs? How are these dogs transported? Is it very much like China, where they're kind of crammed into cages and put onto loading trucks, and for days on end they travel, or is it a little bit different?
Yeah, well, it's hard to generalize because each one of these countries and even within provinces is different. But there are definitely some glaring similarities, right? It is brutal no matter what country, where you are. The dogs are brutally captured. Sometimes they're poisoned, sometimes they're darted. In Vietnam, sometimes they're electrocuted. They're often put in overcrowded, cages, be it on the back of a motorbike. And it could also be in the back of a truck. We've seen Indonesia. These animals are transported in brutal, grueling conditions, lasting, many hours, sometimes days, before they get to their final destination. What was really shocking in our cat meat trade investigation, and I apologize if we're going to get to this, but I'll say it now, is, in Vietnam, we see the loading of dogs and cats into the luggage holds of passenger buses. So like Greyhound buses,
oh my
just
God.
Packed under. And we had an investigator actually sit on that bus, and you can hear the dogs howling. For over 20 hours that bus route.
In Vietnam.
And the trader said, not only do they pay some bribe money just in case the bus gets stopped, but that, they also anticipate, a certain percentage of the animals will die along the way. That's just the normal cost of doing business because, again, there's no ventilation, there's no anything.
Lord. And people see this. Clearly, other passengers are aware that this is happening. The bus driver is aware. Nothing's done.
And this is a major bus company, so stay tuned because this is going to be very, important, I think, a campaigning tool for sure.
Yes.
Yeah, COVID has had some challenges for us, but it's quite shocking.
Oh my God. Okay. And something that your report highlights is a disgusting practice that is pretty much, I think it's more specific to Vietnam, but maybe you'll correct me. And that is force feeding, because apparently you get more money if your dog the more it weighs, right? The following is an excerpt I'm going to read from the report. So force feeding has been observed prior to the sale of animals, particularly in Vietnam. This is similar to the practice of force feeding geese for foie gras, which is the most disgusting thing you'll ever see. dogs are brutally force-fed rice and water or food waste using a plastic tube inserted into their stomach to increase their weight and subsequent market price. This occasionally kills the dog as their stomach ruptures from excessive pressure and rough insertion of the tube. So is it specific to Vietnam, or is it seen in other countries?
We haven't seen it in other countries in our investigation. Not to say that there isn't someone out there doing it, but it's something that we see more specifically and more common to Vietnam, and it's just horrific. We're in the process of writing a public health paper because we really think there's this need for a more scientific-based paper that we can use for lobbying ministries of health on this issue. And I mean, this is just one of these practices where, I mean, it's so revolting, not only from an animal welfare perspective, but from a public health perspective, because a lot of times they're also using like fetid canal water, where you're asking, you wonder why are there cholera outbreaks associated with that? Well, I mean, it's pretty obvious. Like you can't get more extreme. You can't really make this stuff up. Yeah. Is
the practice of foie gras still in place today, or has it been banned, or? It was very popular in France, I guess.
Yeah, it's something that, certainly our food animals, campaign team could talk more on. And I think there are places that are, becoming more progressive, but I do think, unfortunately, we see that in other places around the world.
Okay, well, hopefully COVID will put an end to these horrific practices. People could learn from their mistakes, right?
One can hope.
Yes, we can only hope and keep working at it and keep raising awareness and keep pushing for change. So as far as the slaughtering methods in Cambodia, Vietnam, and Indonesia, are they similar to, would you say, I guess it's, from my understanding from previous guests, I think Cambodia is very commonplace that they put dogs in a crate and they drown them. I mean, this is how they kill them. Others are more, I guess, like they bludgeon them to death, like they try to just kill the dog. And The Sound of Animals was on the podcast, Michael, and he told me that it's not like they want to beat the dog. It's not the same thing as, some countries where they deliberately try to hurt the dog to get the adrenaline going. He goes, they just want to kill him. They don't know what they're doing. So they'll beat the dog. Hopefully he's dead. And then they put him in boiling water. Maybe he's not dead. It's just really that kind of cruelty that's, like a product of their lack of knowledge, lack of know-how. Would you concur with that? Or?
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, that's exactly what I would say as well. I mean, we spent over a year and a half investigating the trade in Cambodia, I mean, nationwide. So the number of hours of footage and hours spent.
Absolutely. And Vietnam, I guess it's boiling. It's
a variety. Yeah, and it's hard to, a lot of bludgeoning, a lot of stabbing. With cats particularly, we see drowning or bludgeoning, like with a small hammer. It's really horrendous. Yeah, I mean, and then the only difference is, certainly in Indonesia, we will see similar practices with, clubbing and stabbing. Often see the dogs hung upside down and they'll collect the blood into a bucket to create gravy. I think very specific.
I've heard of that,
to these extreme markets in Sulawesi, because they really deserve mention, is the blow torching of live animals.
Yes.
So
and that is there's one market in particular that we talked about when I had Lola Weber on the podcast, and it's Tomahan Extreme Market.
So, Lola and I have definitely spent our time in Tomahan, and it's the thing of
And they were actually touting Torres as like a tourist destination. Come and see dogs being blowtorched in cages. It's really, it's hard to wrap our brains around that. I don't know who would want to go see that, but apparently it does appeal to a certain type of person, right? I mean, they have attracted tourism. Even in China, the Yulin Dog Meat Festival was very well attended by foreigners. And
well, I think and that's where we really have to be careful as campaigners, because we want to create outrage, not, a public spectacle that attracts people.
Yeah.
So it's a delicate balance, but it's horrific what's happening there, and yeah.
So the dog cat meat trade in Cambodia, if we'll talk a little bit about that. According to Four Paws research, the consumption of dog meat is not widespread in Cambodia, with fewer than 12% of people eating it on a regular basis. This actually surprised me a little bit. I thought it was more prevalent than that. What would you say is the history of dog meat consumption in Cambodia, as far as you know?
Yeah, that's a great question. Well, we do know because we've invested in market research studies.
Yes.
So we've hired, these agencies both in Vietnam and in Cambodia, and it's really interesting for them because they don't work on stuff like this. They work on products. They work on Coca-Cola. They work on cigarettes.
Oh my
right?
God.
Because they're doing something more appealing. That's normally why people do market research studies, right? You're a company and you want people to buy more of your product.
That's right.
So this was really putting it on top of its head, right? Because now you're asking, well, I want you to go out and I want you to kind of like talk to people about this, like kind of elicit kind of cultural
taboo
thing. And then I want to know, taboo, and I want to know the opposite. I want to know how to get people to stop eating it, right? So it was really cool because it was this 3-phase study where we took a couple major cities and we did door-to-door surveys, and then we did more detailed interviews that lasted 20 minutes with people that said yes, they do eat it. And then we did focus groups, and the focus groups are the coolest part because it's like a CSI where you have like a one-way mirror and you get to watch them and you can pipe in questions and ask them, anything you want about their consumption and why, and their favorite celebrity, and stop eating it. What would make you stop, eating it? If you felt like you were going to get arrested, would you stop? So we really got like an in-depth knowledge. And, in Cambodia in particularly, where I think there's a lot of potential for success and we're going to see more and more, positive momentum, is that this is not Cambodian culture. This is not Khmer culinary history. They very much attribute this to Vietnamese occupation during the war. And it's a habit that they feel, they brought in with the Vietnamese troops. And there's this cultural tension. There is this friction between those two countries. And so they are very quick to say, this is not our thing.
It's
like,
Vietnam.
This is not our Vietnam. Exactly.
Yeah, they're the guilty ones. And some of them thought it was Chinese settlers that brought it to over there. Maybe Chinese brought it to South Korea. Some people say Vietnam. Who knows?
Yeah, I mean, who knows? And so what I do think happened, though, is that it has kind of picked up steam in that, it's young guys going out for hard alcohol, going out for drink. They get their paycheck, and it's a social thing for most people, for most men.
So younger men.
Yeah, younger men, more of like a tuk-tuk driver demographic.
Wow.
But with women actually made up about 30% of the consumption, which is a bit surprising. They will not eat it in public though because of cultural stigma around it. And even a lot of the men are like, oh, I don't bring it home. I don't tell my wife. I have to sneak out with my friends, So there is already that like perception where it's not a good thing.
What is their reason for eating it? Is it like in China where they think it'll increase their virility? Not the women.
So there is a bit of that. Yeah, so it's different for men and women. For men, for the most part, they're going to tell you it tastes good. I go out and I drink with my friends. It's kind of like asking someone, well, why do you eat chicken wings at a bar? They'd be like, because I go out and I,
they like the taste.
For the most part, and it's not super expensive, it's no cheaper. This is a very common misperception. People think, oh, it's a cheap protein. It's not cheaper than anything else. But some men do say, oh yeah, it makes me better and better. It makes me less drunk. With women though, it's totally different. Women usually will eat it because they do think it has a medicinal property. And that stems from public health practitioners in Cambodia actually recommending it, prescribing it for
what reason?
Scars. Yeah, so for like post-surgical recovery, for healing scars. Yeah, so a variety of these different ailments. So
that's a good point, and I want to talk about that because I had someone on the show that did dog meat farm investigations for 18 months in South Korea.
Yeah.
And South Korea, it's very common that they will be prescribed dog meat post-surgery. And the reason we're like, why dog meat? But they're like, oh, because the dog heals very quick. You know, when he's hurt, like the wound will heal up very quickly compared to a human. So we're like, okay, but if that is the logic, then if you want to run fast, you should eat cheetahs? I mean, like, it's just preposterous. So, and the fact that a doctor would do that.
Yeah, well, it's funny you say that because we see that with the cat meat trade. We collected all of these, again, similar market research study, done a lot of interviews, and people will say, well, look at the cats. Like, I don't want to be slow like a buffalo or a pig. I want, that cat has a lot of energy. Like, And
there's a big market for cat. I guess we'll talk about the cat. We'll save it for the cat topic. But yeah, there is. It's more targeted towards middle-aged women for arthritic pain, like as an elixir against getting older, I guess. So you just touch upon one of my questions. So the cost in Cambodia of dog meat is very similar to other meats. It's not more expensive. It's not cheaper. It's just pretty much at the same level.
Yeah, and I would say that we see that across the region. That dog meat, it's certainly not cheaper than other protein sources. And in some cases, it is more expensive. And then cat meat is definitely more expensive. That's like, you're definitely treating yourself.
So that's not for the poor, the cat meat.
No, definitely not. I think this is just like a very common misconception to clear up because a lot of, people particularly, in the Western world say, but they're poor. People are poor.
They need to eat to survive.
Not that. Yeah, this is not that. This is not a survival food. This is, rising GDPs, rising household incomes, and now I want to go treat myself. It's that type of situation. Absolutely. Particularly in Vietnam.
That's important for people to understand. I think most of us that are well-versed or that have been following the issue for many years know, but it's often said as an excuse for people that are not aware the dog cat meat trade. I'm talking about vegans that say, oh, it's their culture, you can't judge them. I'm like, no.
Yeah, who are you to say?
Who are I'm saying it's wrong. If be damned if I am, but it's definitely wrong, and it's not for any survival reasons whatsoever. And actually in South Korea, it's much more expensive than chicken. So there you go. Myth debunked.
Debunked. Debunking them left and right.
So speaking of Cambodia, we had a great victory in July of 2020 of this year. Siem Reap province in Cambodia became the first one to put an official ban on the dog meat trade. So obviously this is extremely positive. Can you tell us how the timeline, the work that went into getting this achieved, and who was responsible, was involved in making that change?
Yeah, I'd be happy to tell you all about it because it was a long time in the making.
Obviously
really
very
excited.
Passionate about this, yes.
Yeah, well, no, certainly I am. And again, credit goes to our amazing local team. I mean, this is where I also just want to give credit where credit is due because we have some really great consultants that are great lobbyists and, really form these relationships, within the government. So we started our investigation in 2018 in Cambodia. And this is, again, because we were investing in a spay-neuter program, the things I was describing. Yeah. A big kind of program in Phnom Penh. And again, we knew that the dogs were going missing. We knew that people were reporting that there were, thieves, but nobody really knew the scale. Nobody really knew what the trade looked like. And so that's when we started investing in, kind of this nationwide investigation. It was really crazy how it kind of unfolded and how there was this really complicated network of wholesalers and traders and slaughterhouses and high volume slaughterhouses. I mean, there are 4 to 5 slaughterhouses about 40 minutes outside of Phnom Penh that feed the city, the capital city, and these places are drowning upwards of 120 dogs a day. I mean, they're like high volume. And so it brought us to Siem Reap because the trafficking pattern is that a lot of these dogs are stolen from, more closer to the Thai border and around, Siem Reap. And then there are these holding areas that, these dogs go to. Thousands of animals are coming in and out of these holding areas every day, and then they're being trafficked to these high volume slaughterhouses that then feed the demand into Phnom Penh. So that's just some background on like the importance of Siem Reap, is that in these holding areas are like right outside Angkor Wat, like historic UNESCO, heritage site.
Wow.
And so we started documenting that, and we put together a report. And at that time also we hosted a press trip where we had international media come, and we showed them the whole scale of the trade, right? The holding areas, the restaurants, we got into the slaughterhouses. And at that time we also closed our first dog meat slaughterhouse as well and rescued the dogs. So all of that happened, and I would say, in sometime in early 2019. And so at that point then we went to the Siem Reap provincial government. So we submitted some official letters, submitted the reports, and we met with the vice governor, and he took this very seriously. I mean, it was really incredible. The first meeting we had, there was 11 representatives from all the different ministries: Ministry of Commerce, Ministry of Tourism, Ministry of, Public Health. So it was really cool, and they were like, the governor is very upset about this. Like we just want to make clear.
They're like, are you sure? Like, should I pinch myself? And when you say we, you're speaking about Four Paws? When you say we,
I'm talking about Four Paws,
okay.
And we certainly work with them, and we work with our local charity partner, Animal Rescue Cambodia, as well. So this is a dual kind of initiative. And so we brought to their attention also all of the negative media after the press trip, because after the press trip went on, AP released their content. It was picked up by 180 news agencies around the world, which always shocks me, because I feel like the news often gets saturated, dog meat trade, but this really got great pickup.
Wow.
And so, of course, this did not make them happy, because I brought many of these articles, and I showed, this is not good.
For their reputation,
so
that's for sure.
It's always a balance, though. It's always a balance, because you don't want to make people so angry. I mean,
that they don't want to work with you, that
they're like, get out of my office. And stop.
Who are you?
Exactly. Give me your visa. Exactly. You're out. And so it's about being supportive, and that's really how we always view our role, is we want to support the government to, make these changes. And so we left that meeting not really sure what that was going to look like, and they sent their Department of Ag people out to the markets, out to verify all of the locations we had told them about. So that was really cool. We knew that was happening in the background. And then we see this kind of historic announcment that
so they didn't tell you that they were going to do it. You found out with us?
We found out with everybody else. I saw it and come on, I sent it to our local. So I was like, what's going on here? Oh yeah, they banned dog meat trade. Great. So
that's a big victory, and you feel like they're taking it seriously, because it's often the case that we're like seeing, okay, it's banned, but it's not enforced, And that's often the problem. It's the other side of the coin. You need to enforce those new laws. And are you confident that they are willing and able to do that?
Yeah, so it's a really good question, and I was actually just going to pick up on this, because we have sent our investigators out to now verify, right? And almost all of them have been shut down. So I think 21 out of 23 of the restaurants have been shut down. We are seeing a couple raw meat vendors, and we are going to address that and hopefully next week, actually. But so what's really awesome is that we're actually seeing the provincial government going out and meeting with the traders. I mean, it's all over their Facebook. They're really putting it out there. There's a prominent district called Bante Shray district in Siem Reap that is, the governor is very progressive and he asked us for, high quality photos so that he could go out on his personal Facebook and the government Facebook page to say, we will not tolerate this. He's been going out meeting with any of the existing traders, and so we will continue offering support. Like, if support is needed for people to transition out, but it looks like they're already taking care of it.
And so this is amazing, because often the problem is the government is not supportive of that change, because, like, for example, in South Korea, a lot of the government officials are actually like dog meat. So they're not going to, like, try to ban something that you like and enjoy, and that's part of their tradition. But is Siem Reap, like, really the notable exception, or do you feel like, have you approached other provinces in Cambodia that have a similar interest and following their example, or?
Yeah, we have. Well, it's really cool too, because we have an MOU with CMAC. It's called CMAC, and it's a canine demining organization. So because landmines are still such an issue left over from the Vietnam War. And so these dogs, so this organization is a government organization that uses dogs for detecting these mines. And so they were really instrumental in actually hosting the first ever workshop. We called it Hero Dogs, of course. But it was attended by over 70 government officials about the dog meat trade. And this was the first ever, like, that we had really brought together. And I think a lot of people, even within government, didn't know that this was like I'm sure you live in Cambodia, you see dogs on the back of a motorbike here and there. You don't appreciate the scale. And we had someone from the market research company come and, like, present what it was. And it was interesting because we even had some government people at the end say, yes, I used to eat dog meat, but no, now I'm not doing it anymore. Because we had owner testimonials, of course. We put together some really, like, emotional videos.
Wow.
But we don't see that similar sentiment in a place like Vietnam. We know that there is, a large partake of dog and cat meat by government. And we don't see that same aesthetic.
A lot of corruption too in Vietnam. Yeah, a lot of corruption.
Exactly. So we are working with, particularly right now, with the national government. So slaughterhouses fall under the Ministry of Agriculture, which is a group called the General Department of Animal Health and Production. And we've met with their DG, with their Director General, and he's made very clear that these are illegal. These dog slaughterhouses, dogs are not part of their, in their livestock animal health code. So we have been trying to follow up to get an MOU signed, and it's just been a long process, because we'd like to, on a national level, then we're going to go and, shut these places down and have the authority to do that. That is a work in progress, but that's really what we see the next step is a national ban.
Wow, that would be amazing.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, it did happen in China, right? So they took the dogs off. Well, I mean, they were never on the livestock catalog, as I know, and I don't think they were. But the fact that the Ministry of Agriculture of China came out saying dogs are now considered companion animals, they are not to be exploited for food or other reasons like leather and all that stuff. So, I mean, it's nice, but we need, like, legal framework around that, and to make people accountable so that they can be giving out penalties, imprisonment if somebody is known to be selling dog meat. What are your thoughts on China's decision to do that? I mean, it's great, but
it's incredible. It's landmark, and I say if China can do it, why can't? Why can't
and China's a huge country, so it's going to take some time to work out and to eliminate the trade. It'll never be eliminated completely. I mean, like anything that's outlawed, you're going to have some underground operations, but it would be significantly reduced,
That's with any trade, I mean, we get that question a lot, but what about, aren't you going to push underground? Well, I mean, there's always that potential, but if we can really take out
still, like, it'll be reduced dramatically. Yeah.
It's exciting. The China decision is really exciting for us too, because Cambodia really kind of takes its
it's cue from China. Okay.
Yeah, there's a lot of Chinese investment in elections and in government.
Okay, just like an anecdote, like it just came at the top of my head. Like, since Cambodia, there's like bad blood between Vietnam and Cambodia. Do you think the fact that Cambodia might ban the trade, that Vietnam's going to go, well, hell no, we're not going to do that?
So it's funny you say that because, we also have media contracts, in each of these countries where we are able to get local press releases out. And it's really interesting because we did a slaughterhouse closure in Cambodia and we released our cat meat trade report in Vietnam around the same time. They're about a week apart, which is poor planning on our part. But what was funny is that in Vietnam, cat meat trade got very little pickup. They didn't. The local media doesn't, right? Because you never want to talk about yourselves, right? You always want to point,
especially a bad story like that or a negative story.
And so the slaughterhouse, that got a ton. The slaughterhouse in Cambodia got way more national pickup within Vietnam because it's kind of like, ew, look at that, look at what they're doing. But it's like, so it's a PR game, as well to play. But I think it's really good for leverage to say, look, if they can do it.
Yeah.
Like,
Hanoi, I mean, are you going to be the last one, like, to jump on the bandwagon of what's the right thing to do? I mean, we're hoping they'll want to progress.
Yeah. And tourism is just so important. And I think, we look at the tourism industry is devastated right now, with these international flight bans in place. And so I think that it'll become more important as, there's going to be a very limited market. Even with Asian tourists in terms of where people choose to go. And
for a country like Cambodia, tourism is a very important part of their economy. So,
well, that's exactly it. It's a huge contributor, even more so than in Vietnam with GDP. So we actually work very closely with an organization called Animmondial, which works with animal welfare and tourism. And so they are, kind of managing the tourism part of our campaign, working with ministries of tourism and regional, kind of operators with tourism industry. So we're really trying to hit it at all different angles.
Wow, that's amazing. But speaking of the tourism, I did read in the report something that surprised me quite a bit. So the director, CM Reep's director of the Department of Agriculture, Forestry and Fisheries said that tourism has led to a growth in demand for dog meat. And that really was surprising to me because, as I mentioned, I had Sound of Animals on the podcast, and they thought it would be good to leverage Cambodia's tourism industry as a way to negotiate with the government to ban the dog meat trade because it would be, obviously, the trade would be detrimental to foreigners wanting to visit your country because it's like a stain on your country. It doesn't look good. People are against this. Like, most foreigners do not believe dogs should be slaughtered for food. I mean, dogs are a man's best friend in most of the world. So that was very surprising. Can you expand on that? Like, it did bump up the demand for dog meat?
I cannot say that our investigative findings support that statement.
Okay. We'll leave it at that.
Exactly.
Okay. Very good. So you've just answered my question. I was like, what has Four Paws done in Cambodia? Well, you're doing amazing work. So that is great. So now let's talk about the Cats Matter Too campaign, which is a program in Vietnam, actually, that Four Paws is commissioning. It basically provides medical care for thousands of cats in addition to educational programs for children, which is key, right? Teaching children animal welfare and that animals are friends and, how to care for pets. So in 2019, Four Paws International, with Change for Animals Foundation, commissioned a nationwide investigation into Vietnam's cat meat trade. So you already touched upon some of the results, but the findings made it into an official 25-page report, which is obviously available on Four Paws' website. The links will be posted in the video description. So the report reveals many facts about the trade, the legality aspects, the public health risks involved, and outlines the immense cruelty that cats in Vietnam are subject to on a daily basis. It also highlights the recommendations you're proposing to the Vietnamese government. So in Vietnam, I mean, am I correct in saying that Vietnam is the country with the highest per capita cat meat trade? I think.
It's hard to say because, again, I'm not very active in China, and I do appreciate that cats are being killed in well, so it's hard to kind of, and China's just so big population-wise,
Yeah,
it would be hard.
But per
really
capita, it might be. Per capita.
Yeah, but certainly in Southeast Asia, it's number one.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so obviously the report outlines a lot of things, but I was curious to know, in Vietnam, what is cat meat typically used for? Is it more of medicinal purposes that it's consumed for, or just traditional dishes? Like there's a soup called Little Tiger, I believe, that they eat that's kind of popular.
Yeah, unfortunately, it's becoming more popular. That's correct. Yeah, I mean, the dish in general goes by the name of Little Tiger Thịt Mao in Vietnamese, and it used to be like a culinary dish mostly localized to the north of the country, so in and around Hanoi, and there's a province called Tay Binh, which is known as the kind of the cat meat capital of Vietnam.
Okay.
And but the sad reality is that the dish is spreading, right, as people move. I mean, it's spreading. We did live in a global society and where there was rapid movement.
Yeah.
Not so much anymore. Certainly where people move, from the north to the south, and they take their culinary habits with them, and so we're seeing these restaurants really pop up throughout the country, and we're seeing similarly, like, what's really surprising is just the long distance cross country transport of these cats, where again, with networks of suppliers, wholesalers, slaughterhouses, distributing to restaurants, it's this massive industry and trade when you actually start to investigate it. And it's decimating cat populations, particularly in central Vietnam. And so that's really where we got involved, was because our two local partners and where we ran our Cats Matter 2 program, there was, there still is, cat meat holding areas right down the street from the program where there's trafficking hundreds of cats every day. And there's, motorbikes going on and snatching cats, and they are setting these little traps to catch cats at night. And then those cats are going all the way to the north of the country to supply the trade. So it's really just remarkable. And in terms of, why people are eating it, there is, more kind of superstition in Vietnam. So if you eat dog meat in certain parts of the lunar month, that's good luck. Similar with cat meat. People think it's auspicious. It will, bring me good luck for, if I eat it in the beginning of the month. If it's eaten at the end of the month, it kind of gets rid of my, of bad things or whatnot. And so there's a lot of superstition associated with cat meat. And similarly, like with medicinal, some people do believe it has medicinal properties, particularly black cats as well. So they fetch a far higher price.
Well, yeah, the black cats, actually one of my previous guests, which is a fellow Canadian, Lana Roski. Hi, Lana.
Yep.
She actually is very passionate about this cause, and she's the one who started as far as we know, the only social media group that focuses on cat meat trade as opposed to dog meat. Called Feline Warriors, if anyone at home has not seen that.
I think I posted videos.
No, it's really great, the work they're trying to do in raising awareness. So she was the one who told me that black cats in particular, they apparently crush their bones and make something called goyang jisoo. Mm-hmm. And this is promoted as that elixir, like a youth elixir for middle-aged women to prevent arthritic pain and so on and so forth. Yeah. So I'm just curious at this point, like, how long has Vietnam had this cat meat trade? Like, it dates back to many, many years, I suppose. Or any ideas of the origin, or no?
I'm not super sure. Yeah, and I mean, this could have been one of these things that was born out of poverty at one time, and then it just kind of picked up speed. But it's really hard to pinpoint. But what we do know is that suppliers are reporting massive increase in demand. They can't find cats locally, which is why they have these cross-country transport networks. They're getting cats from 20 hours away. But that business is really good for them, unfortunately. Even we had an investigator out this week, same thing. People are not willing to get out of this trade.
Yeah,
big money.
There's big money to be made for those involved in the trade, and I'm assuming cat meat, like we already talked about it, it's more expensive. It's much more expensive than ordinary meat. Well, conventional meat, I should say. And the demand has actually increased in recent years, and that, I don't know what you would attribute that to. Is because of the lack of cats, so that they're smuggling more cats? The demand is increasing. And why is that?
I mean, it's certainly there. I think there's a supply demand as well, where they're increasing the price. Some of the traders said, we're able to double our price now for cats, particularly black ones. And I also think again, it's rising household incomes. There's some similarity, I would say, with the wildlife trade in that it's perceived as more exotic. It's more well, I don't want to have chicken. I want to have black cat. I want to go and treat myself.
Okay, so it would be attributed to maybe the increase in household income, like people have more disposable income, so they can afford to dine out like at a fine restaurant and enjoy cat meat, for example.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. But what's interesting about Vietnam is this, massively growing pet owner movement, and I think see that, I mean, far more if you want to compare it to, let's say, neighboring Cambodia or Laos. I mean, it's just on a different scale. And it's even reflected if you look at like pet food statistics and, pet corporate companies and veterinary supply companies. I mean, they're all reporting, this massive growth and projected growth. And you see so many local groups that are Vietnamese run, Vietnamese rescuers, where you don't see that so much in some of these other neighboring countries. It's mostly run by expats and run by foreigners. But these are, some of these groups, shout out to Hanoi Pet Rescue, who's, in our coalition. I mean, they have upwards of 700, 800,000 followers on social media. It's incredible.
Hanoi Pet Rescue, they're called?
Yeah, Hanoi Pet Rescue. I think their name's going to come up in Vietnamese. But just incredible social media presence, and people really love their animals. And so it's this really interesting discrepancy where, you have just this utmost, compassion and love for their animals. And particularly with cats, there's a lot of cat events, cat lover events, pedigree cat, events,
so it's
in the north of the country.
Big divergence,
Yeah, it's really incredible. And so that's why, I think things will change. I mean, things have to change because people's pets are being stolen, and pet owners are, they're exercising this vigilante justice, actually, beating and killing in some cases, particularly with dog thieves. And so you can't have,
we understand completely, but And
that is a universal feeling, right? I mean, anybody who owns an animal, I don't care where you are in the world, you know that feeling of, particularly if your pet goes missing. And this is one thing I always hit home when we're talking about the victims of the trade, is that in the West, if your animal goes missing, I mean, what do you go and do? You put signs, you go to your animal control, you go to your local shelter, right? And chances are, like, maybe you'll have to pay an impound fee and you get your animal back.
Over there,
in Vietnam, if you're missing, you have to jump on your motorbike, go to the holding areas, try to go to slaughterhouses, go to the market, and hope you can buy your cat back before it's bludgeoned to death. I mean, it's like, what a world.
Crazy.
And so this is where I feel really conflicted as a veterinarian as well. It's like, if you really are, a veterinarian to really stand up for animal welfare and particularly for companion animals, like, this is just crazy.
It's absolutely crazy, but I guess would you say like the consumer of dog and cat meat in Vietnam are older, like more traditionalists, like, or would you say you see some younger people like you've noticed in Cambodia where it's like, oh, it's cool, let's go have some drinks and eat dog meat, or?
Unfortunately, the latter as well. Unfortunately, the latter. We're going to the club.
Damn. Because I was gonna say, when the old generation dies off, we have hope, but if it becomes trendy, so.
That's exactly it. And sometimes I think we just need to hire the best marketing campaign. We need to get Nike's, and Adidas, their marketer.
Oh, but it's funny you should mention that, because one of my guests, he had the brilliant idea, and I thought that would be a great campaign, is to use a local celebrity in one of those countries. For example, we were talking about China, like to have someone that everyone admires and respects say, I don't eat dog meat, because, like dog meat is like, do you want to be a loser? Or he was saying you should have like a poster campaign where the people eating dog meat look like losers, degenerates, And then the people that don't eat dog meat are like super cool and, you know, like respected, and they look cool, and they've got a good following. So the popularity, you know, vote would, you know, tilt towards not eating dog meat, and if your favorite celebrity says it's wrong, well then, you know, like maybe you would abide by that.
Yeah, well, it's funny you mention that, because we do try to engage with celebrities, you know, as part of our local campaigns.
Yeah.
And we have agencies, right, that's their job, is to enlist these celebrities. Yeah. And we've had some success in Cambodia. Shout out to Nikki, who's a famous singer and actress in Cambodia, and she's done some really good kind of PSA type work for us on social media. In Vietnam, it has been much more challenging to find celebrities.
And South Korea too.
Yeah, it's same. Yeah, in Indonesia, again, but great work. You know, DMFI Dog Meat Free Indonesia has, you know, a lengthy list of Indonesian celebrities that are willing to speak out. So that's really great. So again, it's so variable by country.
Yeah, it is. In terms of almost like a different trade altogether sometimes. But yeah, totally. In South Korea, we thought K-pop, you know, like superstars could, like, you know. Yeah. Make something of it, but I think in South Korea the problem is they don't want to disrespect their elder, and you know, the elder are often dog meat consumers, because, you know, that's part of their tradition, if you will. But, you know, I don't know if everyone at home is aware of this, but what's funny is that cat meat was actually officially banned in Vietnam in 1998. And it was banned for, I'll let you tell us the reason why it was banned at the time.
Yeah, well, yeah, and definitely, you know, different issues back then, but it was banned because of, you know, it was in an effort for the government to promote rat populations, or, you know, the control of rat populations, to take care of like a crop blight, essentially.
Vermin control. Send the cats out.
Vermin control. And anybody who has cats know they're really good at that.
Yeah. So it was successful. At the time, I guess, in 1998, were people arrested if they would eat cat, or not really?
Yeah, well, this is where... Yeah, I mean, this is where there is both a circular and a directive, but the issue is there was never really an actual penalty involved, you know, that was assigned to that. So it's kind of saying, well, speeding's illegal, but we're not going to tell you, like, what the actual speed limit is, or, you know, the penalty for that. And so didn't really go in force. So while it was very disappointing that this was repealed, I think, you know, the Vietnamese government just did a cleanup of old laws that just...
Oh yeah, so important to note that the ban was in effect until 2020. So as of 2020, it's no longer illegal, if you will. Not that it made much of a difference, because all these years, like, it just kept increasing the consumption of cat meat. But often I find, like, I don't know what's your opinion, but I find it's very hard to get those governments to really implement and enforce these laws. And I don't know, what is your feeling? And let's just focus on Vietnam for that. Like, you've had some, I'm assuming you've had exchanges with government officials in Vietnam, and what's their attitude? Are they, you know, in favor of this, or are they just like, okay, we'll look at it tomorrow, and then it goes on to 10 months?
In other places. I mean, and again, I shout out to Indonesia, which maybe we'll be talking about, but again, you know, it takes... The thing is, it takes years of engagement, right, and to develop that level of trust as well. And it's always, you know, do you take, you know, a carrot or a stick approach, right? And so we always try to offer, right? Offer support for rabies control programs, offer support for, you know, sterilization programs, veterinary training. And so we've done all of this in Vietnam. Actually, when I was at Soi Dog, we actually sent a couple of the Vietnamese Department of Animal Health vets to Soi Dog for veterinary training, right? And so we try to offer all of these things, and then, you know, you get to a point where then, okay, if those things don't work, then, you know, we need a different approach.
Right.
We certainly through ACPA, through the Asia Canine Protection Alliance, we continue, you know, dialogue, particularly with the Department of Animal Health. an approach that we at Four Paws has been taking specifically is to look to offer support to other municipalities specifically to say, talk to their people's committee and say, well, how would you feel about, really tackling this issue? And it's been met with mixed responses. And what's really challenging now in the times of COVID is trying to even get these meetings. This is not high on the political.
That's just making things a little bit slower for.
So yeah, exactly. I mean, where we have really had some degree of success, and I don't want to kind of speak too much in case something falls through, but we've had really great discussions with the Hoi An government in central Vietnam, where we have our local charity partner, Vietnam Cat Welfare. Shout out to them and the amazing work that they do for cats day in and day out.
All right.
They are really, Hoi An is, it's very touristy. It is, their old city is, again, a World Heritage Site. And so they seem very interested in kind of, looking at their image.
It's like pockets of hope, pockets of, more acceptance.
Exactly. If we can create a model, that others might want to emulate and they see a benefit to them.
If all the tourists would go to only that place and then the others would be like, oh, okay. That's a nice wish.
Exactly.
But with Lola, that you know very well, I'm sure, we did talk about, and that was my puzzlement, because we all know that these governments want to put an end to rabies spread. Human rabies takes the lives. And before that, since we have a veterinarian on the show, I would love for you to tell our viewers a little bit more the main health risks regarding surrounding dog cat meat trade. Rabies is certainly one of them. And then what is rabies and how and who can contract it and what are the consequences? Like, it's fatal, I think. I'll let you talk.
It is fatal. Yeah, that's a big question. Yeah, trying to think of where to start. So yeah, I mean, there are a lot of public health risks associated with the dog and cat meat trade that's not only just linked to consumption. Like consumption, that is part of it, but it is the whole trade that undermines infectious disease control programs for an entire country, for an entire region. And rabies feels very foreign, I think, particularly to people in North America and to Europe, because there's been decades of work, right, to eliminate dog-mediated rabies. And now if you hear about rabies, you usually think about wildlife, right? You think about raccoons or depending on where you live, bats. But the key difference is that, particularly in Asia, dogs are the main way that people get rabies. I mean, up to 98% of cases of human rabies, it's not wildlife, it is dog rabies. And the reason that North America has gotten rid of dog rabies is because we vaccinate our pets. We control stray dog populations, right? So, but it's, thumbs up to public health officials in North America. In Asia, it's a different story. And so, the way that people are being exposed, to rabies is mostly through dog bites, and it's mostly in children. And it's an invariably fatal disease if it's not, addressed immediately. And in most communities throughout Southeast Asia where rabies is prevalent, people don't have access to we call it PEP, but to the kind of the treatment that you need once you get bitten. And so many people are dying from this disease, and it's also one that it causes a lot of stigma around dogs, and you can kind of understand it, right? If you're from a village and your aunt died right after, you wouldn't like dogs, right? You would probably not be very nice to them. People would poison them, and so you kind of understand that mentality. And so how does kind of the dog meat trade play into this? Well, a lot of these countries, they recognize, this is an issue, and they've taken an official pledge to go rabies free. It was 2020, now it's by 2030 to get rid of rabies. And you can do it. Again, countries around the world have done it. Latin America is a very good example where, there's some similarities in terms of, the country's GDP and poverty. They've done it through effective dog vaccination. The way you eradicate rabies is simple. You vaccinate dogs. You vaccinate enough dogs where you create herd immunity, and then they protect people. They're like the soldiers against the fight. And people, treating people, it's expensive. It's too high a public health burden. You can't go around treating people it's hundreds of dollars.
Attack the source of the rabies, and that's the dog.
It.
Yeah.
And rabies vaccine is dirt cheap for dogs, if you order them in bulk.
Yeah.
And so governments. But what do we do? Like, what do governments do? They don't focus on the dogs. They focus on treating people. And it's way too expensive, and most people will die before they ever even get offered treatment. So the way the dog meat trade feeds into this is that countries will not eradicate rabies if you still have a rampant dog meat trade. So why is that? Well, for one, let's say the government goes around and vaccinates all these dogs. Okay, so you have herd immunity. Okay, but now traders are killing all the dogs. They're getting rid of your vaccinated population. So what does that do? That increases dog population turnover. You're going to get new dogs being born, unvaccinated dogs, and then they will contract rabies. So you're getting rid of your protective herd immunity, right?
Yeah.
So then the other thing that it's doing is that it's collecting large numbers of dogs, many of which are rabies positive, and they're shipping them across borders, shipping them across provinces into busy cities like Jakarta, for instance, into Hanoi, and then putting people at risk, right? Because people can get bitten by the dogs, the traders are getting bitten, they're aerosolizing as they're butchering, potential virus particles, people can die, traders are getting infected. And it's also transporting rabies-positive animals across, international borders, which is certainly not in anybody's interest, right? And you think about Vietnam, for instance, go back to Vietnam, they do spend a lot of money, millions of dollars every year in rabies control, in dog vaccination programs. However, they are importing millions of dogs, both from southern China and from Cambodia, Laos, countries with really high rabies prevalence into their country. So what's the point? I would say, well, then what is the point?
It's negating all the benefits, yeah.
Exactly. And so we have done some testing, and it is, well documented in the literature. If you go into these slaughterhouses and you take so many dog heads, a large number of them are positive. And so it's just really like a no-brainer, even if you don't care about the animal welfare component.
Yeah.
Like, you have a duty as a government agency to protect public health.
Yeah.
And so this would be one of the easiest ways to do that and to help eradicate the disease. But this link between the dog meat trade and rabies control, it doesn't get enough attention, and people don't understand it. And I'm not even sure, the way I'm describing it is simple enough, for most people to understand. But, it's putting traders at risk, it's putting consumers at risk, the butchers at risk. Anybody who has to grab a dog and then try to kill it.
Is at risk, yeah.
Okay, well, yeah, if you think about how rabies is transmitted through bite wounds, it's again, it's a no-brainer.
Yeah.
A lot of people are being exposed to this trade.
I guess what I'm getting from what you're saying is that there's almost no point in investing all your money and resources into vaccinating these dogs as long as the dog cat meat trade is prevalent. That needs to stop.
Well, public health officials would probably disagree. I mean, the thing is, it's a two-step process, the way that I look at it. Step one, vaccinate the animals. Step two, keep the animals in place. Because that's the barrier to humans. That's who protects the humans, right? You have to induce herd immunity.
But they're willing to do the first part, but not the second part.
Exactly. Yeah. That's exactly it.
Oh, boy. Got a lot of work to do.
No, for sure. But it's something that even the government in Hanoi has said, that they want to do more, dog vaccination, more pet vaccination, but yet they completely fail to recognize, that one, you have to keep these dogs alive, but two, you have to stop the import of literally millions of dogs that are coming from throughout the region that are being trafficked into Hanoi slaughterhouses. You're going to go on back 8% of the dogs, and then you're going to continue to expose how many people via this import of unregulated dogs, and that is illegal. I mean, this is what's interesting in Vietnam. The interprovincial transport of animals without rabies vaccination, without quarantine,
is illegal. Yeah.
That is illegal. Yeah.
And they're not stopping it, though, because they're often, they're involved. They take bribes from these dog meat traders. I mean, it's corruption. I mean, there's corruption, and let's not pretend there isn't. But you've explained that so well to me. I didn't know all this, and I'm sure you voiced the same plan to these government officials, and they don't get it. You know, like you convinced me now, like in 5 minutes.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. So we need to also like prevent cross-border smuggling of dogs. Okay. And you know, I think you need to become part of the government. You need to take a seat of the government. Someone's got to be making the right decisions there. But I guess
I agree. Well, I think people want to do the easy thing, you know, like vaccinating dogs. People can wrap their head around that. That sounds easy enough. We'll set up a little clinic. We'll have pet owners come, give them a vaccine. All this other stuff sounds way too complicated. Sounds controversial, too hard. And I think that's where we get stuck.
Oh my God. So they're not really hearing the whole message. They're getting, you know, they're on board for a certain part, but not all. They don't want to invest that much money. Is that kind of the...
I think the issue too, I think, particularly speaking in Vietnam specifically, is that all of these issues require so many different government players, right? Because and again, I'll mention Lola again, because we've always talked about our dream of working with the government to stop these big trucks, because similar to what they did in Thailand, I mean, that was really effective. The Department of Livestock in Thailand said enough is enough, we're going to tackle this trade, and they started stopping huge lorries with 1,000 dogs. And it's a similar situation in Vietnam. Most of these trucks, again, huge trucks, 800 to 1,000 animals, and these trucks just drive right on the main highway, on Highway 1, which is like the main road. And so it would be really easy. And they have to stop at these checkpoints along the way. And so if the government really wanted to take action, that would really send a very loud and clear message to traders. Like, your load is going to be confiscated, and it's a profit-driven industry.
You're going to lose money. You're going to lose money. You're going to be maybe in prison. I mean, they would need to do that. So we've spent a lot of effort in, you know, meeting with the governments and having workshops in these central provinces, and where we thought, you know, there would be some sympathetic, you know, potential behavior towards this. And I think what became clear is that it's just such a multi-stakeholder decision where it's not just, you know, the Department of Animal Health. It is also the local people's committee. It's also the traffic police. It's also the, you know, local market police. It's all of them to work together. And
exactly, and it's almost impossible. And so it's this is where it becomes really challenging. And then what happens to the animals? And so unfortunately we haven't seen that, but we would still love to lend support for something like that.
Yeah, you got a lot of years of work ahead of you. But you know, like, it's like that. Any kind of change, there's always some pushback, and it takes years to get through. But eventually, like you said, you take one province, make it a model, show how it can be done, show the success they're having, and hopefully others will follow suit.
A change will happen. I'm confident.
Well, I mean, you would not be investing all your time and energy into this if you didn't believe there was hope, you know, so
Right.
I think that is echoed by most of my guests, you know. They would not be involved if it was, like, pointless, you know. No one wants to do that. So at this point, in those three countries we talked about, Cambodia, Vietnam, Indonesia, would you say one is more likely to adopt these changes before another, or is there one government that's more favorable? I mean, you did mention some local governments, but what's your feeling?
Well, I mean, with the Dog Meat Free Indonesia Coalition, there has been major strides made in Indonesia, and that campaign is, you know, a year or two, you know, further than some of these others. But that has been really exciting to see, you know, a declaration at a national level. And we have seen regencies, particularly in central Java, that have started taking action, that have started closing dog meat stalls down. And we've seen a lot of closures in Bali as well. The real challenge in Indonesia is that it is so provincial. Like, it is so, like, yes, there's a national government, and yes, they can make recommendations. But in some places, it's almost tribal. It's almost tribal in terms of the level of government that they can do what they want to do. And so that's where we really struggle in, you know, in place like North Sulawesi, where I was talking about these markets, this Tamahan market. They have a whole lot of autonomy to do what they want to do, no matter what the national government says. Also interesting about Sulawesi, not surprising, one of the highest rabies endemicities in all of Indonesia. Why is that? Well, I'm going to tell you why. It's because of the dog meat trade.
Yeah.
And but we have seen a lot of progress. However, and there was an MOU in place that was in process with the city of Yogyakarta, which is one of Indonesia's largest cities. So all of these positive moves, a lot of this is stalled, with COVID. So, but again, I think a lot of promise there, and like I mentioned, a lot of promise in Cambodia. I think that's moving in the right way.
Well, especially the fact that Cambodia has a smaller dog meat trade. 12% is not huge. So maybe there's more hope there.
Yeah. You know what, though? It's interesting, though. Just to share some of the market research study, data as well in Vietnam. Again, we did a similar study, and we found that, only 11% of people were eating dog meat regularly. And that was out of a survey that combined both Ho Chi Minh and Hanoi. And in Ho Chi Minh, it was like 1.5%. So it's really easy to generalize and think it's like really inflated. And the number of animals it's incredible. However, this is what I always drive the point home, is that this is an activity of the minority, like the minority.
Yeah.
Like 1.5% of a major city. So come on. So that's why I think change will happen. It's just finding those kind of lever points.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so I wanted to touch upon, we already talked a little bit about this, but just for viewers at home, we have had some progress being made, and I think COVID was kind of a catalyst for some of those changes. So in April 2020, Shenzhen and quickly followed by Zhuhai, which are two big cities in the Guangdong province, which is in the south of China, they became the first two Chinese cities to ban the sale and consumption of dog-cat meat. So I do want people to understand that there's a difference between what the government in China said. It's illegal to sell dog meat, but it's not necessarily illegal to consume it, meaning a family could kill their dog, and as long as they're not selling it to the public, it's okay. So these two cities, it's both, it's an all-encompassing ban. And also, obviously, China's Ministry of Agriculture and Rural Affairs came out with a statement that, dogs were pets and they were not on the National Livestock Catalog post-COVID-19. And so these are all very promising changes, more to come. And then Siem Reap in Cambodia, they banned the sale and consumption of dog meat. Then we also had a story in India, like Indian state of Nagaland. They banned the import, trading, and sale of dog meat. So this is all super encouraging. But we're left often wondering if it has any actual impact for the victims of the trade. Because, as we all witnessed this year, I was very disappointed, but the Yulin Dog Meat Festival went on its 10th year edition in 2020, even though, in spite of the the Ministry of Agriculture statement. So we're like, okay, well, it's going to take time, like we talked about. It's going to take some time to work out legal framework around this. It's not a law per se, what the China's. It's not on the national livestock list, which in my mind means it's illegal. But there's no law that says if you eat dog or sell dog cat meat, this is what you're facing in terms of penalties, imprisonment. So there's none of that legal framework around it. So I guess we're just going to have to be a little bit more patient. And I just was wondering, what's your opinion about all these changes that came about in 2020? You're happy, obviously.
Yeah, of course. It's really exciting. In some ways, COVID has really made a lot of things more challenging. Obviously, we're not able to go to government meetings. We can't travel.
Yeah, for sure.
We can't secure meetings. However, on this flip side, like what you're describing, it's just been incredible. Some really landmark, decisions, and even, there was a ban on the wildlife trade in Vietnam.
Yes.
And so what we're really trying to do is also get the attention. Well, these dogs and cats are also, an infectious disease issue. So, yeah, it's been really exciting.
The market where the COVID-19 virus originated from was Wuhan and the province of Hubei, China, and they sell dogs and cats as well. Like almost anything goes. They would sell bats and all sorts of wildlife and dogs and cats included. So I think it shone a spotlight on that problem. And I was also very surprised to hear that in New York State alone, there's about 80 live animal markets. And so we're like, oh, this is not just like an Asian thing. It's like everywhere, like a little bit everywhere. And
100%. It's the way that we treat animals. I mean, just in general. Aside from the dog and cat meat trade, aside from wildlife trade, it's in agriculture. It's, it really just permeates the way that we, use and treat animals and exploit animals. Yeah. That's the root of the issue.
And I personally, in my personal life, my family is not vegan. I mean, my family is very small. It's my mother. Mostly my husband's not vegan. And my uncles and all that. And they're complaining so much about COVID. Oh, I'm like... in quarantine, I'm limited, I'm on lockdown. And I'm like, well, maybe you should rethink the way you live your life and what you're consuming and what you're contributing to. I just wish this was a wake-up call. It is a wake-up call for many, but unfortunately not enough. Not enough people are like just really taking a conscious look at how they're contributing to this. It's going to go on. We're going to have other pandemics. They're going to become bigger and bigger and worse and worse. More people are going to die unless we change. And, I guess we can only hope, but I would think a pandemic of this nature, I mean, it's the worst pandemic we've ever experienced. You would think it would be enough to push governments to take action and to crack down on these live animal markets.
I agree. In some ways, it's depressing because this is how I would say it too. It's like, what will it take? Global pandemic?
Yeah.
International economic collapse?
Armageddon. Total apocalypse. What else do you need? Read the signs, the writings on the wall. Wake up. I guess we're all a little bit frustrated by this, but I guess time will tell. So I have, I wanted to touch upon, I know we're a bit short on time, but I did want to touch upon psychological impact of rescue, because you've been, how many years have you been doing this, directly involved on the front lines, seeing extreme animal cruelty? And I can imagine that this must have changed you in some way. And what is the impact on you emotionally?
Yeah, I mean, it's a good question because it does certainly take an emotional toll. Seeing this kind of day in and day out, and certainly I'm not alone, and other campaigners that have to experience this as well. And I think everybody has to have their own coping mechanisms. And I get this question a lot, and I feel like I always struggle with an answer because I don't have the answer. It's never easy. It's always horrific. I think it's important to take some breaks from it, and I am a believer in self-care, in that if we don't take care of ourselves, we can't help the animals that we want to help. And I do believe also in, and this is one thing, I mean, God bless working for a European charity, because Four Paws is based in Vienna, Austria, and they take holiday very serious. And I guess me being American, work on our holidays, we work on the weekends, we're still sending emails. That's a good point, because a lot of European firms, I work in finance, and they have off the bat, you start day one, you have 4 weeks vacation. I'm like, it took me just about 10 years to get that. But yeah, very good point. So you do exercise, self-care. I mean, is there something that, I do yoga. Do you have something that you can lean on like that? Yeah, I mean, Fitness is very important for me. So, so certainly taking that time, be it in the gym or whatnot, is incredibly important. And I think also, I mean, I have a team of colleagues that we can also kind of lean on. And sometimes we'll take turns, for instance, reviewing the footage. Particularly the cat meat trade footage was just really, I mean, I love dogs, but cats have a very special place in my heart. I'm definitely more of a cat person. Oh, wow. And so to see that, which is why I keep pushing, for us to work on cats and to make this more of an issue, because it just doesn't get attention that dogs get. And hence our feline programs in Vietnam. So I struggle with
footage,
reviewing that particularly, and so we will sometimes divvy it up between us if we have to put together a campaign film or whatnot.
And also, it's good that you have other people that understand what you're dealing with, because I don't know, your husband, I mean, he's probably not in the same field as you, so it's hard to relate to what you're witnessing. And just me, myself, I discovered this dog cat meat tray very late, actually, in 2018, late 2017. And immediately when you go on the internet and you see all these images, it's just so traumatic, and it's very disturbing, and it took a toll on me. And this is me across the screen, so I cannot imagine seeing this in person. So I always say that activists, it's so important that they have something they can go to release this, this trauma. Like for me, I do yoga, and I no longer look at the videos. I can't, it's just, I know myself. It caused me sleepless nights. I'm like, no, I will try to do what I can to help this cause, but I don't need to look at the videos. And I also make a point that I have a group on Facebook myself for the dog cat meat trade, and one of my rules is like, do not post extreme videos or graphic images. We don't need that. Like, we know what's happening. Let's focus on solutions. Let's focus on updates and strategies, but let's not share like crazy videos of people abusing animals, because that's not helping, It's just making us putting us in a state that we're not effective. And I think you would agree with that.
I would, and it's really challenging as campaigners too, and we have all of this footage, and we know that it will never see the light of day, because I mean, particularly
it's too brutal.
Brutal. I mean, there was 1% maybe, and it was cat looking out of the cage. I mean, it's just incredible brutality, and so it's hard to balance too. And sometimes you become a bit desensitized to what is appropriate for, because you see it so often. And
you're like, they need to see this. but
we'll send it to our poor we'll send it to our poor video editors in Vienna, and they're like, no, we're not putting this out. So no,
don't show that. Well, I just when we were talking about the fact that people don't know the extent of the cruelty that's involved, because, obviously the campaigns don't show it for good reason. And I'm part of a vegan community, and I live in Montreal, and there's a big vegan movement. And often they'll say to me, oh, it's the same thing they do to farm animals. But although I completely agree that animal agriculture is horrific. I've seen footage once upon a time. That's what made me become vegan. I think you cannot compare the two, really, because, I mean, they're both animal cruelty. That is a fact. But the dog cat meat trade is particularly brutal because it involves criminal acts. I mean, it involves, the theft of your pet for the most part. It's also the methods of slaughter are pretty extreme, whereas, farm animals, apparently they try to stunt them so that they're not aware when they enter the slaughterhouse. And also even the transportation alone. I mean, I've seen horrific footage in South Korea, the way those dogs are transported. They're pretty much, they have their limbs broken. It's just very, very crude. What is your opinion between, like, do you see a difference, or just like lump it all into animal cruelty and there's no difference?
Yeah. Well, no, I agree with all of that. And it's a question we get a lot is exactly that. Well, what about the farm animals? And I would totally agree with you that it is all horrific.
Yeah.
It's all cruel. And that's why we also have a farm animals campaigns team, right, that works to improve
Four
farm animal
Paws
welfare.
does do a lot of animal welfare. I mean, wide-scale animal welfare, not just dog, cat, meat trade, but you tackle all sorts of issues. But yeah.
Exactly. And so I say we don't turn a blind eye to farm animal welfare. We certainly recognize that's an issue, and we have teams that work on that. And at one person, we can't do it all. I can't do it all, right? I can't tackle these.
Can't save all the world's problems.
Right. So we try to specialize and we try to be effective as we can, and we focus on certain issues. What I would say is that the dog and cat meat trade, because dogs and cats do have this closer relationship with people, particularly when we look at children, when we look at also trying to evoke like empathetic attitudes and compassion for all animals. Yeah. We can do that usually most effectively through their pets, through dogs and cats, right? More so probably than we can with farm animals. And so I always argue too that this trade just undermines this notion of compassion towards animals. And we really use dogs and cats, with, our school programs to evoke, kind of, again, empathy for all animals. And so this trade just completely undermines that. It is brutal. It's taking people's pets. It's fraught with illegality. Yeah. And it just has no place in the 21st century.
Very well said.
And certainly not an excuse.
Yeah. And also, if we can point to the fact that, by the way, they eat pigs, chickens, and cows in China too. It's not like the way they were talked to me sometimes is like they're substituting dogs for cows. No, they eat all animals. And the dog meat trade is very much on top of this horrific animal agriculture that is prevalent in those countries. Every country in the world has animal agriculture. So this is on top. And it's in a certain part of the world. So my hope is that if we can eliminate this trade, we can make even more progress in animal agriculture, because it seems like the first shoe to drop would be the dog cat meat trade, because dogs and cats are domestic animals for most people in most of the world. So this is something that we can maybe win in my lifetime. I'm really hoping.
So that's one of the arguments too, and I'm glad you brought that up because I forgot about it, is that, we really feel like there is a real opportunity and a real chance to get dogs and cats from ever becoming an actual item on the menu. Like a standardized, you go to a restaurant, okay, do I want this to all these different types of animal fleshes? Oh, I'm going to get the cat today. Well, we have a real opportunity to keep them from that, that ever happening. Yeah. So, whereas I think the other animals, it's going to be really challenging.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's great. Okay, so this is a personal question for me, but I think viewers at home will also be curious. So a very hot, controversial topic on social media and certainly amongst vegan community is the safety and risk of feeding your cat a vegan diet. So personally, although I'm a longtime vegan, I have resisted the idea of forcing my cats onto a vegan diet because I know they're obligate carnivores. I have a lot of concern over how safe it would be. I've read up on the issues of cats on a plant-based diet because plant protein, they don't assimilate well like meat protein, animal protein. And also the fact that I'm a fan of Jackson Galaxy. Jackson Galaxy, do you know him?
I do. Well, not personally, but
but I mean, he's like the cat daddy, so the quintessential cat daddy. Yeah. So he is fiercely against feeding your cat a vegan diet, and he's vegan. He became vegan. So if the cat daddy himself is against it, I'm like, you know what? I'm gonna, not take that risk because my cats are so important to me and I love them. But since you're the first veterinarian on my show, of course I had to ask you, what is your personal and professional opinion on this?
Yeah, well, they're one and the same. I would agree with the cat daddy as well in that, cats are exactly as you said, from a strictly medical perspective, they are obligate carnivores. From a pathophysiology perspective, that they cannot synthesize taurine, like it has to come from, which is an important amino acid, it has to come from the diet. And so we have an ethical obligation to provide them with, an appropriate diet. And the consequences can be serious. I mean, it's not just like a preferential taste, right? This is the fact that they can get a heart condition known as, dilated cardiomyopathy, where the heart becomes larger and it becomes very weak, and cats just simply can't thrive like that. And so while we have our own ethical preferences about, food procurement, and certainly animal agriculture, it is the nature and the biological nature of a cat that it needs to have, a certain diet. So without getting too much into the ethical weeds, I agree.
It's hard to, I mean, I had, luckily I had someone on my show that is working on a revolutionary formula for pet food, and it would be made of cultivated meat, which would be meat, but it would be done, I mean, it's not a new technology per se, but it's never been used to produce pet food, and that I would be all on board. Like, give me that. I'm waiting for that. So a lot of pressure on this poor guy. Kevin Leahy is the guy. And hopefully, our science will be there and we'll come up with a solution for this, because I always tell my vegan friends that are very, what I call more militant vegans, I go, you should not have a cat. Don't have a cat, have a dog, because I think a dog can do pretty well on plant-based diet. Okay.
Correct. Yeah.
I got the veterinarian's answer.
Exactly, confirmed. I mean, cats are special in every sense of the word, and it doesn't surprise me that their biology would be different as well. Yeah. But that is just the unfortunate reality that they do need these amino acids. And I do think so much promise in, these kind of laboratory-based meats, and I think we'll see that grow. It's certainly something that Four Paws is, again, fingers crossed, and really looking to support where we can. But yeah, so we'll see. It is exciting times. And again, as we kind of bring it full circle, with COVID, hopefully that we'll see a lot of advancements in things like that are alternative, animal products, because the world needs it. The economy needs it. We just don't have a choice anymore. It can't get any worse. Yeah,
the environment is telling us we need a change. So, okay, so if I can just trouble you, we have a new feature on my podcast. And you're the first one that we're going to get viewers' questions. And so I have just 3 questions for you. So the first one is from Laura Thierry, who's also an administrator on my group. So hi, Laura. Yep. So she is wondering, because she actually adopted a dog from China, from a nonprofit in China, and she adopted him right when the pandemic hit. So she's very curious. Currently, we are aware that flights from China are delayed due to the issue of COVID. Is there any information Dr. Polak may have to shed some light on the status of transports of adopted rescues to the U.S.?
Yeah, I certainly do have some, not maybe from China, unfortunately, but because we just closed our second slaughterhouse, our dog slaughterhouse in Cambodia, where we work with the owners to transition their livelihood. So we were a bit, I mean, this is a conversation we were having that, the question is always, what do you do with the dogs? I mean, to put it very bluntly, because the capacity for in-country care is very limited. Yeah. And so we have dogs that are waiting patiently in Cambodia that are waiting to go to the U.S. And of course, we also pursue local adoptions whenever possible. But sometimes that's just not always an option. And so we have been, diligent in monitoring flight routes. And the good news is, there are increasing number of flights, and it's about getting the right airline with the right, to the right destination. So we, particularly in Bangkok, there are certainly more flights that are beginning to open up, particularly with Qatar. We're really, we love Qatar because of the number of dogs that can go per accompanied baggage with a passenger.
Yeah.
Unfortunately for us in Cambodia, Qatar completely cut service to the whole country.
Oh.
And they're not looking to bring it back anytime this year. So that's really challenging in terms of, well, then how do you get the dogs to Bangkok to fly them from there? But what I will say is there are certainly flights that are operating. People are shipping dogs. We have a dog going to LAX. Hopefully, I'm looking at the calendar, hopefully next week, fingers crossed. So it can happen. It just it's more time consuming.
And that dog you just spoke about is in Cambodia? Or
Yeah, that dog is Cambodia, and we sent 2 dogs to LAX a couple weeks ago, so it is possible.
And how did you manage that? Because you said no flights out of Cambodia, so how?
Yeah, well, so we love Qatar. So Qatar, because of the number of animals we can take, but there is a 2-dog limit on EVA Air, so we were able to check on EVA Air to LAX, but that is the only route that we can get dogs, like the only city. So.
So it highlights the necessity and the importance of adoptions, right? So that is a great way that people can help. And that will lead us into our second question, because Eva Pavalainen, I hope I said that right, she's the one who's the co-administrator on Feline Warriors. So they focus on cat meat, the cat meat trade. So her question is, what is the best way for ordinary people like me and her to help end the dog-cat meat trade in Vietnam? She's very focused on Vietnam for the reasons that you highlighted, that there is an increase in demand of cat meat in Vietnam. It's a big mecca. And she would be curious to know what you would suggest that us here on this side of the ocean can do to help the trade in Vietnam.
Yeah, well, I think you two in particular are already doing quite a lot, quite more than the average person, so thank you for that. I mean, certainly there are several things, and I mean, certainly these are not going to be novel ideas. We're obviously running a petition, and I know people get very much petition fatigue, and they don't, oh God, another petition, what do these really do? I keep signing, nothing's happening. But what I will say is that, I can only speak for our petition and what we're planning on doing. I mean, we certainly are looking to do in-country activities, digital activities, in-country lobbying with the government. And I had a whole weekend last weekend of writing these open letters. So don't underestimate the value of a petition and sharing it, getting colleagues, friends, and just in general, increasing awareness about the issue. Certainly if we're looking to target one country over another, certainly writing to your, ambassador, to your embassy, consulate, if there, I'm sure there's a Vietnam consulate in the U.S. and telling them, look,
rather than writing to the Vietnamese government. I think from a foreigner, not too effective.
Yeah. It has a whole lot of impact, but I think if you lobby, and we do that as well. I mean, we certainly, again, we have all these country offices around the world, and that is their job, right, to also engage with embassies and ambassadors on this. Because if you can make it an issue with them and you get enough attention, then they will then bring it back, to the country as well. So don't also underestimate, I think, the power of engaging with, the representative for that country and that embassy. We do a lot of petition handovers at the embassy as well.
And your petition, we did. I like circulating. Like I'm trying to promote it. I signed it. We're all signing it. But it's important to know that not all petitions are good. And a petition from an organization like yours that has a lot of resources, that have been doing it for years, they have the clout to actually make change happen. So sign those petitions. Those are great petitions to sign, but don't sign like Joe Blow that started a petition on this site and it's not going anywhere. Often these people, they start a petition just for a symbolic effort, but it's not going anywhere. So, so that's a good point to make, is like there are better petitions to sign than others. And certainly one from Four Paws is definitely up there. So,
yeah, well, thank you for that. And I guess I'm a bit naive, but because at the end of the day, I mean, we have a lot of people working on putting together a plan for how exactly we use this to make impact, because that is the whole point, right? And so even though our petition is is generalized to Southeast Asia, you know, we will be looking to deliver it to, you know, very specific stakeholders. We have a whole list of those stakeholders.
Yeah.
We do get a lot of people saying, well, who are you even sending this to? Well, okay, there is a whole plan.
Yeah.
You know, certainly we don't petition to say, you know, spell out what the plan is, but there is certainly a plan around that.
And
you know,
yeah, go ahead.
Oh, sorry, go ahead. Yeah, and then I would just say, you know, also just to support, you know, the work that we're doing with the local partners on the ground, you know, and that could be, again, even liking, sharing, commenting, supporting the work that our partners are doing. Again, I'll mention them now. Pause for Compassion, PAWS, or Compassion in Vietnam Welfare. So those are our kind of Cats Matter 2 program members. But we also have just launched, I mean, we haven't really announced this yet, but we've just launched a Cats Matter 2 coalition in Vietnam. So that also has the involvement of other local Vietnamese charities. And our idea is to really create kind of a digital movement and to really promote, you know, this issue, to increase public awareness and mobilize people within Vietnam on this issue. So we have some activities that, you know, are penciled in that we would like to do. I don't really want to mention them here because whether or not we can do them or not because of COVID.
Yeah.
But we have, you know, certainly a plan, you know, lightly penciled in of things that we would like. Yeah, exactly. That we would like to do with cats. So there's also an opportunity, you know, potentially to get involved. If we rescue cats, maybe someone's interested, they know a cat rescue that we could, if we want to do some rehoming of these cats. I mean, there's certainly lots of opportunity there.
So, and I will have to say it because donate. Donate to the ones that are actually doing the hard work, because we're here in our living room, we're not there. Pay the people that are actually there on the grounds, able to do the work that you cannot do. And obviously, you know, some people are afraid, you know, because there's been a lot of like scams, but Four Paws is certainly not one of them. And, you know, you do your research, you'll quickly find out the ones that are not legitimate. And so that's super important, because we can talk about it all day long. We can share, sign petitions, but at the end of the day, you need money to do the work that you're doing. So, yeah.
Well, I'm glad you said that, because I'm a bit more modest than you. Yeah, but that's
well,
that's exactly
I have to say it, because a lot of people, they're like sharing horrible pictures. I'm like, what is that doing? It's not helping.
Yeah.
Donate like $5, even if it's $5, $5 multiplied by many will add up to something, you know?
Agreed. All of this takes money.
Yeah.
To get things in the media takes money, to do investigations, to lobby government, to pay local staff,
Spay, neuter,
and team members,
cost money.
neuter cats, vaccinate cats, and to host community events, and to host to be able to assist the government. This stuff all takes money. Yeah. But I will say, I'll also just mention that, again, being an Austrian, you know, based charity, we have to comply with Austrian tax regulations, which are among the worst. You know,
you cannot fraud people.
I can very much attribute to the fact that we have very high levels of due diligence with our financial.
I concur. I mean, I concur. Four Paws International has an excellent reputation, and, you know, widely recognized. So there's no concern over that.
Yeah.
Our last viewer's question is from Ilda Pereira. And she wants to know, what role has been played by international animal protection organizations with Asian governments to end this terrible barbarism of dog and cat meat trade? I will continue. I ask this because I think it's just a big international reaction scale could have some impact on these nations so disrespectful and inhumane to animal life. So I think what she means is like, I mean, you've already talked about what you're doing with local governments in Vietnam and Cambodia, but I think she's asking if, you know, if nonprofits could band together and make like a big wide-scale campaign to these governments, but it doesn't work like that, because like we talked about, every country is different, every country has a different dynamic, but I'll let you answer.
Yeah. It's true. I mean, it's a good point, and we certainly do use. I mean, there's needs to be a balance of leveraging, you know, like local momentum and support, but then also international support. So that's why for our campaign we have kind of campaigns team that they work on the international side to try to, mobilize people to get it out there, to get, again, petition signatures around the world to lobby embassies and other key stakeholders that also might have some leverage in these countries, tourism industry, for instance. Yeah. Whereas, the work that I do more primarily is on the ground. It is how do we then translate this to make change and to get people's attention. Yeah. And so there's definitely all these different angles we can take, right? And I think it's finding the right balance to be effective. I hope that makes sense.
Well said. And so, final question for you. Okay. Anyone that you feel I should have on the podcast, and why? Any guest recommendations from you?
and have you had Lola Weber on here?
I've had Lola Weber. I can tell you, I think I had sent you the list, but anyone that I might not know of that would be able to be on the podcast, because I know you work with local groups that probably don't speak English or don't, the language might be a barrier. But maybe well, you can always email me after the show if I'm putting you on the spot.
No, that's okay. I mean, we work with so many very inspirational, a lot of our local consultants within the countries that have this really in-depth kind of, knowledge of the topic, and they really look at it from a local perspective. And I think that, it's not a Jill Robinson, from Animals Asia. However, there is just this really great insight, and I think can really speak to it from a local perspective that, it's easy for me to come, okay, I'm American, and this is what I think about it, I'm very opinionated, but to really hear about it from a local perspective, I think it'd be really interesting too, something that we just released a video on the cat meat trade that featured pet owner interviews, and they're really powerful. Wow. To talk about that feeling of having your cat stolen.
Oh, yeah.
And so,
I know.
What we had talked about doing is really trying to get interviews set up with them, to really kind of relay their story. And there were some concerns because they're nervous about their English, and fair enough. If I was to be on live interview, I'd be nervous as well. If I was speaking, Thai language or something. So I don't know, but let me give it some thought. But I do wonder if there are some kind of local campaigners that it might be, kind of insightful to get their input on the issue.
It would be great. And actually, I did approach some local activists in China, but they're not just activists, they have kind of a nonprofit going, but everyone's very nervous about talking to me, little me, over here from China, because they're afraid, especially when it's a foreigner that's been working there, because they don't want to be viewed as talking negatively about China for many reasons. They could be, ousted. But yes, it would be great to have someone local. And actually, the podcast did have the honor of speaking to local Chinese, who's the director of Animal Hope and Wellness China Shelter, Suki Su.
Great.
And so, we got to hear from her perspective, and she had never heard about the dog meat trade until she actually went to study in England and saw it on a documentary from the BBC. And she was like, really? So it just goes to show that it's not as widespread as people might assume, and China's a huge country, and so she had never heard of it until then, and she's doing great work, and so cool. Like you said, it's so important that it comes from the locals, that the local population gets involved and wants the same change, because we can scream at them all day long and say this is what you need to do, but unless it comes from them, it's not going to work, right? So
that's exactly it. That's our role, is just kind of give it a little bit of a push and really empower the people that are passionate about it within the country, is lend support. So yeah, that's exactly it.
That's perfect. That's perfect, and I'm glad we ended the podcast on that note. I thank you so much. You've been amazing. Yeah. I'm so glad I finally got a vet on the show, and I hope maybe I will have you on the podcast again and talk about other, updates.
Yeah, more victories.
All right.
Fingers crossed.
Thank you, Dr. Polak, and we wish you the best. We'll follow your campaigns and the progress you're doing with Four Paws International. I invite all the viewers to check out the links below and support them, because support Dr. Polak, support Four Paws International. They are making change happen. So.
Wow. Thank you for all that you do as well. I appreciate it.
Okay, thank you so much. Have a wonderful day. I'm going to go to bed.
You too. Yeah.
Ciao. Bye.
Bye-bye.